Okay, the purpose of this talk is to talk about the 6 facets of instructional product evaluation. Those facets are review, needs assessment, formative evaluation, effectiveness evaluation, impact evaluation, and maintenance evaluation. These 6 aspects of evaluation align to the traditional instructional design and development process, going from product conceptualization through design, development, implementation, institutionalization, and project reconceptualization. So each one of these evaluation functions aligns to a part of the design and development process. So review is really before the project gets started. And so a lot of what happens in the review process is you're spending time trying to figure out, has this been done before? Is there some existing training out there? Why bother building something new if there's something that's already well made and out there and available for use? To use as an example, in our own department, we teach a lot of different instructional design and development tools. So we've taught Flash, we've taught Captivate. We're now very much interested in Articulate Storyline, and we teach these tools. Well, we could create some instructional content to teach our students how to use these tools, but there's a variety of websites out there that do this kind of training, including lynda.com, and lynda.com has extensive training on all of those tools. So rather than making our own, we use lynda.com for those things. And so what you want to do is you have to find out, is there something out there? Is it good? You might find stuff that's out there that's not good that you want to improve upon. You know, how are they teaching? Is there a way that you would teach it that would be better than the way that it exists currently being taught? So review products, examine products, and review the related literature. These are some of the primary methods that you would use to do the review process. So then you go to needs assessment. Now in needs assessment, still this is before you start building anything. And again, evaluation is involved in all aspects of the design process. It's not something done at the end. It's stuff that goes on all the time. And needs assessment's really imperative and often skipped. And needs assessment really decides whether or not the thing that you want to train on. Often what you decide to train on is politically motivated. Someone in the organization has decided this is what needs to be trained on. Our people don't know this, but it might not be the source of the problem. And so if you read the textbook, they use a mining example where there's been an increase in mining accidents, and they decided that the management decided that they wanted to do a kiosk at the head of each mine and have the employees train on safety procedures before they go in. Well, if you do a needs assessment, and they did in this case, they found out that really what was happening was there was a new high-speed drill, and that high-speed drill they didn't know how to use properly, and that was the primary source of all the injuries. So again, you want to figure out what's the problem and then be able to provide the training that would align to that particular problem. The primary methods that you have available is task analysis, looking at the specific task, breaking down into its components, figuring out what it is that needs to be trained. Job analysis, by looking at the job and figuring out what the job is, that the requisite skills and knowledge that are necessary to perform the job. And then the learner analysis, what is it that learners already know, what skills do they have, what's their setting, what's the context, and how are you going to provide this training. It typically leads to a list of goals and objectives, and that's really the basis of the design. So it's really important that you do a needs assessment in the training process. Once you start building stuff, you really need to do formative evaluation. And formative evaluation can take place at all kinds of different points. It's probably the most important evaluation strategy. You can do evaluations by basically doing a mock-up and having people from the target audience review those mock-ups. I did some work with Disney and Disney Connected Learning. they used a design process for their game design called Agile Scrum. And one of the things they would do with Agile Scrum is every 2 weeks they would have a sprint. Every 2 weeks they would build a new prototype. And so they would build the prototype of the game. They wanted these games to be educational but fun at the same time. And so at the end of the 2 weeks, they would give that prototype to a team of educators that I was working with. The educators would review it and say, if you changed it in this way, it would be much more functional for learning. They would go back, think about that, try to make the game do that. At the same time that we as experts in education were reviewing it, the game design experts were also reviewing it. And so there would be this tension between the educational benefits and the game design. And again, their 3 rules were it had to be fun, learning should happen, and it had to be fun. And so in the end, the winner had to be the game designers. But again, you got to give feedback on it. You got lots of feedback on it as you were going. The other thing is they put it in front of actual children that would be from the target audience to see how they would react to it. Again, they pulled lots of interesting data from that, and it impacted how they went forward with the development. So formative evaluation is key. It provides results to be used to impact the development before you spend a lot of money on the development. Clients or sponsors may be reluctant to accept the results of formative evaluation. But again, it's been my experience that if you present the evaluation clearly to the decision makers and the designers, then changes are made. So now you got it built. You've gone through, you've done the review, you figured out that this is something you need to build, you've done the needs assessment, you figured out exactly what to do it, why you need to do it. Now, and you went through the formative evaluation process, now you want to see, is it any good? And so this is typically a short-term effectiveness. It's right at the end of the class. You might do, it's necessary, but it's insufficient. So at least you have some indication of whether or not the learning system that you've built has met the objectives. So how do you do that? Well, you do that typically with some sort of performance measure, but you have to also collect some survey data because there's all kinds of reasons why something might not be working appropriately. So you might find that people aren't performing well, but it might be due not to the training, but to some other technical issue that was involved. Yeah, you have to understand how they're implemented, but you also need to measure outcomes. Now, impact evaluation is really, when we talked about Kirkpatrick in the last talk, impact evaluation is, okay, so now you've learned it, are you now using it on the job? Is it something that you're now going to do? And again, this is probably one of the least often done forms of evaluation, but this is probably the most important. And if you think about it from a higher ed point of view, then really what you want to do is, are your graduates being able to function on the job? Are they successful, and are the employers that are hiring them coming back to your institution to hire more of them? And in a job setting, in job training, you really want to find out, they do this training, and did they take it back to their job, and are they using it in the job, and is it having an impact on the business? So evaluating impact increasingly critical. It really does define whether or not you can whether or not you can keep your job. I mean, it really kind of, as a training designer, training developer, as an evaluator, you want to figure out, is this being effective? And if it is, and if it's impacting the bottom line of the business, then you're really sort of building a case for keeping your job. And so more and more legislators are expecting impact return on investment approaches to evaluation of training. Actually, one of the biggest things that's happened with all the for-profit schools out there offering online education is legislators are saying, are these graduates who now have paid for this online degree, are they able to get a job? Are they able to get gainfully employed in the field that they got trained in? And so that's sort of an ROI impact evaluation on higher ed. And that happened with the for-profits, but now the legislators are turning to all the other universities and saying, what does this mean? I mean, if you get a degree here in our LDT program, is it preparing you to take that job? And if it isn't, then there's a problem with the curriculum in the LDT program. Maintenance evaluation is probably the least done evaluation. So now you've gone through, if you've done everything right, you've figured out, is this something you want to do? Is it a good thing? Is there, there's no other materials out there. You got the needs assessment. You figured out what you wanted to do. You did a lot of formative evaluation. Yes, they learned from it. They're using it on the job. But then you start using this over a period of time, and then you have to say, are things changing? One of the things that happens in technology is always changing. This year's version is replaced with next year's version, and the training suddenly becomes outdated. And so you have to do maintenance evaluation. You have to see if it's still having the impact that it had initially. And so you need to be continually evaluating it, and you need to have it feed back into the front of that where when you find out it's not working anymore, you have to go back to sort of the needs assessment mode of evaluation. Some of the methods could be document analysis. You can do interviews. You can do observations. Some of the things can be automated. Data collection. So one of the things we've done here at the University of Georgia, and actually throughout the system, the university system of Georgia, is we've adopted this new Desire to Learn system. Well, one of the things that you can do with Desire to Learn is you can kind of keep track of how faculty are using Desire to Learn in their courses, and what functions are they using, and are there functions that they should be using that they aren't using. Again, a lot of that data can be collected, aggregated, and in fact, some of the big movements in terms of research and evaluation in our field is called big data analysis. So again, with big data analysis with Amazon can see how buyers are searching for things, finding things, and buying things, and they can do an analysis of that big data and really figure out trends so that it then impacts how it presents products to me as I search for things, and it's based on previous buyers and their performance. Well, that same process is being used in e-learning. They're looking at these big data and trying to make decisions about e-learning based on the big data. And that's all data that's automatically gathered inside of, say, a learning management system. So evaluation planning is key. I mean, just as instructional design is really important to plan, evaluation is also important. So the keys, planning is key. Evaluation requires good planning, careful implementation, and systematic follow-up. You are sort of doing a scientific method. You should have a white lab coat on. It really needs to be very precise in the things that you're doing. A major challenge is getting stakeholders to identify the decisions that they face. And then what you need to do is you need to align those decisions to everything that you do. So if you can figure out who are the key stakeholders and what are the decisions that they need to make, and will they make those decisions based on data that you generate? And so once you get to that, you get that established, then you can move forward. So step one is to identify those decisions that must be made about online learning. Whether it's going to be adopted, is it going to expand, is it going to be more? What are the things you're going to do to improve it? What's the chances of you abandoning it? Is there going to be a reallocation of funding? What are the decisions that are going to be, that are forthcoming, that can be data driven in the way that you make those decisions? Clarify the questions that must be addressed to guide those decisions. So you start with the decisions, then you figure out what questions you need to answer in order to inform those decisions. Who's using the programs and why? How can the LMS be improved? What is the impact of education or research? These are some questions that you might use in trying to figure out the next step, which is then to figure out what methods you're going to use to collect that data. So what's the methods? Well, you could use observations, you could do interviews, you could do focus groups, you could do questionnaires, you could do data log analysis. Again, this is automatically collected data, expert reviews, usability studies. These are some of the many methods that you might use, and frequently what you want to do is you want to use more than one, because again, if you use more than one, then you can kind of triangulate, which means that if I'm looking at assessing whether or not you actually learned from the program, then I might have a performance test, but I might also do observations and I might also do interviews. And I can use all three of those to come together to make sense of what that evaluation data is showing me. Step 4, collect the data. And again, I'm pointing towards triangulation here. Revise data collection strategies as needed. So if things aren't working, you know they're not working, don't go forward with it. Change those data collection strategies. Accept limitations, but aim for quality. Be sensitive to the demands on all participants. So you can't, again, it would be nice to collect data on, 100 item survey. Well, that can take a lot of time for somebody to complete a 100 item survey. So really be sensitive to the demands on the participants and make sure that the data that you're collecting is important, and it all feeds back into answering those questions, which then feeds back into the decisions that you're making. Report findings so that they can influence decisions in a timely manner. Get it out, get it to the decision makers as soon as they need it. And so if they need it now, get it to them now. If they don't need it till next week, well, then you could take time to do the analysis correctly. Use multiple formats. Try to find the most powerful ways that you're going to be able to communicate those results to have the impact that you want. Engage the stakeholders in a focus group, so you can bring them together as a focus group. Present that data. Have them critique that data. And then you can respond to those critiques. Don't hide complexity. If it's a complex process, don't make it too superficial. Go ahead and make it as messy as it is. So here's an example, and again, I'm basing this on Dr. Tom Reeves, and so this is a project that he had worked on medical training, and this was something that was a combination of CD-ROM and online training, and they needed the CD-ROM because they really needed really rich information and really clear photographs in order to be delivering this training, and that would have been too time-consuming to download on the internet. As part of a large-scale soldier online initiative, the client was Joe Henderson at Dartmouth Medical College. The audience is the U.S. Army, especially the Army Medical Department and the National Guard. So web-based training medical, there were 2 e-learning programs. One was for the regimental surgeon, for officers learning how the chain of command works. So a lot of medical doctors in the Army really don't have much experience in the military. They don't really understand the chain of command, and so part of the training was on that. The other part was much more on life-saving skills, and acute cardiac life-saving skills, which was sim trauma. And so this was for medics, it was for medical doctors, but it was a very intense training on these specific skills. Both programs won National Design Awards as interactive video disc programs when originally created for the Navy. So evaluation decisions. Establish delivery options for e-learning at various sites to try to figure out what's the best way to deliver this content at the various sites. Determine instructional design specifications for future courses. So again, so if this is successful, we may want to build more courses in the future. Establish an implementation procedures, registration, tracking, assessment, so you can kind of work out some of the logistics of finally implementing this content. Refine the evaluation methods, and then promote e-learning in the military context. So these are some of the decisions that stakeholders were going to make in this project. So then you have to ask, what are the questions? Well, so how is the e-learning implemented? What are learner reactions? What are instructor reactions? What enhancements are possible? What are the outcomes? So if you let me go back to the slide on decisions. You start with what are the decisions they're making. If you translate that into a set of questions, well, now these questions make it a little bit clearer about the next step, which is what are the methods that you're going to employ. And so you could basically set up a matrix, and I absolutely advocate for this, so that you have questions down one side of the matrix and then your methods going across the table, and then you can put little check marks or stars to say, are these observations that I'm doing, what question is that going to answer when I'm observing? And so this really makes it clear, and it makes it clear when you go to do the observations that it needs to be answering how is the program used, and what the learner reactions are, and what enhancements need to occur, and what learning occurs. So all those things have to be the foci of those observations. So what happened in this project? Well, they collected data on 77 physicians and other personnel were observed and videotaped using the program at the U.S. Army Medical School. Questionnaires were collected, interviews were conducted, user tracking was difficult, so they tried to track it in the software, but they weren't able to actually do that. Performance test was eliminated. So the evaluation results. E-learning implementation was required the web and CD, so it needed both. So the video content and the image content was on CD, whereas all the other interactive material was on the web. Technical problems were initially encountered, but in fact faded over time. Positive reactions from both learners and instructors, so this is a good outcome in terms of effectiveness. Enhancements to the pedagogical design, human-computer interaction, and infrastructure were recommended. So one of the problems was technical problems, and so a better infrastructure would help it. Apparently, there were different interfaces in the system, and they really wanted it to be the same human-computer, same kind of interface throughout the entire program, and they wanted to refocus on the pedagogical design. So there was a high self-reported learning. So self-reported that I learned a lot. Recommendations: enhance interactive aspects with respect to feedback and learner control, standardize the interface, and develop more programs in this series. So again, one of the decisions we want to make is, do we want to do more of these? Well, the reactions were so positive that they did make the decision to do more programs in those series. Some more recommendation: integrate e-learning programs throughout the Army Medical Department curriculum. Develop Army versions. Again, most of these were Navy versions, so they wanted Army versions. Enhance technical features of the program for distribution throughout the Department of Defense, and conduct further evaluations and initiate a rigorous research design. So again, the effectiveness evaluation, they eliminated the test, and apparently the decision makers wanted those tests back. So let me just kind of review. The 3 keys to evaluation planning is really to figure out who your key stakeholders are, and then once you find out who the key stakeholders are, what decisions are they hoping to make based on your evaluation. Once you have those decisions articulated, then you can derive from those decisions a set of questions for each of those decisions, and the questions may overlap with certain decisions. And then once you have your questions, it's really pretty straightforward about what methods to employ. But I don't want you to go away thinking these are the 3 things that you have to do. Part of the plan in evaluation planning, it's a pretty complex process, and here's sort of it encapsulated. You have to have an introduction, you have to get background information, you need to define purposes, you need to get the stakeholders, you have to figure out who your participants are, you have to create instruments, you have to figure out what the limitations are, you have to work out all the logistics, you have to have a timeline, you have to have a budget, you have to have all these things, but embedded in the middle of that is the 3 key things: decisions, and then from the decisions, questions, and from the questions, methods. And those 3 drive all the rest of it, but all the rest of it is a part of what it means to do evaluation planning. So there you have it, 6 key elements to evaluation and an overview of the evaluation process.